Hi, Patrick. Good to have you here on the podcast.
Thanks for the invitation. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what got you into diving.
Good. What got me into diving was a local search and rescue team in the Austrian Alps. So I'm from the Austrian Alps originally, and we have a lot of lakes and rivers. And so we have an ambulance, like we have the Red Cross, and then we have a similar system for the mountains, and we have the similar system for the water. Many of the people like myself that did the mountain rescue team then also do the water rescue. And I joined this team because my father was a part of it. And so there I learned how to dive at the age of I think I was 12, 13, something like this. So it was every Tuesday meeting in the evening, and then on the weekends we would go diving. The rescue team had rental equipment, so I had my first wetsuit and all of this stuff from there. And I still really remember my first dive. I remember the smell of the wetsuits. I remember how the seagrass moved. It was very, very impressive for me. And then I finished a school for natural science. And I was an avid climber also. And in my last year in high school, I had a climbing accident. And I broke my back. And in Austria, after high school, you have to join military service. But because of my back injury, the military said, okay, for 1 year, you are excused. Actually, not excused. We cannot draft you. But after 1 year, you have to be re-evaluated by a state doctor who will then evaluate you and say you can either join the military or not. But for 1 year, you can't. So I was like, okay, what am I going to do for 1 year? If I go to university, then I go military, I'm going to have to repeat that university year anyways. So I was like, well, what am I going to do? I don't want to go to university also by myself because all my friends are going to go to military. And then my father said, why don't you go somewhere as a dive guide? And now it's 25 years later, something like that. I never made it back. So this was my beginning. I went first to Croatia, then it got winter, too cold, no clients. And then in October 2002, I moved to Egypt. And yeah, I got blown away. It was also high times in the European diving industry in Egypt. I worked for a CDC, a career development center. We had 3 full-time course directors at the time. We taught 11 IDCs per year, average 15 candidates per IDC with 5 IDC staff. It was madness. And I fell in love with it. And so I did this for 5 years. In 2005 was the first time. So I did already mixed gas diving at the time in Egypt. And then a German client actually gave me a book from Barbara am Ende that is about Bill Stone and the exploration in Huatla. And I recall it perfectly. I opened the book in the middle, is where all the pictures are at. And I saw somebody rappelling in a dry cave with a rebreather attached to them. And I thought, hang on. I can climb and dive in the same sport. Sign me up. And with a little bit of research, I came to the Yucatan Peninsula in 2005 the first time. To shorten a long story, I came to the owner of the dive shop and said, hey, I have 2 months' time, I have $10,000, teach me everything you know about cave diving. And so I did this, then I went back to Egypt, 2006 came back, did another 6 weeks in Mexico, and then said, that's it. And since March 2007, I am a permanent resident in Mexico. I own 2 dive shops called Protect Dive Centers, one of them in Playa del Carmen, one of them in Tulum. And then I'm a very avid Sidemount diver, and that led to me developing Sidemount equipment, first for a manufacturer in Europe that was called Equus. There was my Stealth 1, and then my relationship with X-Deep started in 2010, 11, I don't remember. And then I designed the Stealth 2.0 together with the owner of X-Deep. And that was my foot in the door with equipment, manufacturing, and design. Because from all the cave exploration that I do, so this is 2 aspects to it. There's the cave exploration that I do, so I go to very remote areas, and I kind of find out what works or what doesn't work in my own type of diving. And then I'm teaching a lot of diving also. And specifically at the beginning of side mounting, there was no commercially available Sidemount equipment. So every client that came, it was like a 3-day course. The first day, we spent butchering their recreational BCD and creating a harness out of webbing with the shoemaker on Constituentes in Playa del Carmen who was able to stitch the webbing together. So we just basically created Sidemount harnesses out of thin air. And so from the mix of like exploration, cave diving, and teaching, I got a pretty good idea of like what would work and what doesn't work for my clients. And since then, I've designed dry suits for 2 different manufacturers and Sidemount equipments for 2 different manufacturers and regulators and primary lights. And yeah, so it's a passion of mine to also design and manufacture diving equipment. And ultimately, it led me to becoming one of the owners of KISS Rebreathers, and now since the last 4 years tackle the biggest project I've done in my design career, which is to redesign a closed-circuit rebreather, get it C certified in Europe, and then launch it to the market. So, and that's it in a nutshell.
Okay. Well, this is not all. So you talked about cave exploration, and there is, with me working for Dan, I'm interested in all the nitty-gritty safety details in those expeditions. And I hear that you're taking these expeditions really seriously and have a lot of experience in organizing them and putting everything together. So did you come up with things yourself, or were you guided in getting into these kind of expeditions?
Good question. So my personal exploration history started in Mexico. Now, cave exploration in Mexico isn't that challenging. I don't want to disrespect it. Of course, it is challenging, the whole underwater part. But the actual logistics part wasn't difficult for us because in the evening I sleep in my own bed, right? So in Mexico, I have the possibility, I go to my dive shop, I pack my bag, I go to the jungle, I cut a little bit of trail, I hike for 20 minutes, half an hour, I have the cenote there, the cave entrance there, and then I just jump in the water and lay some line, right? So that was my first step into it, and also what got me hooked to exploration. It is next to impossible for me to describe exploration to somebody who hasn't explored. Because, first of all, of course, there's the thrill of the unknown, right? And to live in 2025 and to be able to say, I have discovered parts of this earth that no man or woman has seen before me is, of course, an insane privilege. The second part is exploration is like the ultimate emotional roller coaster because you never know what you're going to find, right? People compare it to like mountaineering or alpinism or maybe outer space travel, what maybe it's a bit extreme, but if you think about that, it's not really accurate. Because even when specifically Austrian alpinists, Austrian alpinists
you are going there, aren't you?
Austrian alpinists were very famous in the Himalayas. Right, because most people saw the movie 7 Years in Tibet and know Heinrich Harrer, or Reinhold Messner, which of course is Italian, but Reinhold Messner, right? So when they did their expeditions to the mountains, they already had binoculars and they had weather forecasts, so they kind of had some idea of what they were getting into. They could do some of the research and due diligence to do some planning, how much rope we need to bring, what's the weather going to be like, when do we have a weather window. Even if you think about outer space travel, they can calculate the trajectory. They have a lot of measuring tools to understand what they will encounter. And in cave exploration, we don't know nothing. I can turn around a corner and it could be a dead end. I can turn around a corner and I can find the paleontological site of the century. Right? I can find bones from animals that are extinct since thousands of years. Or I can go around the corner and I can find an endless tunnel and potentially find the world's longest underwater cave. So there is a lot of this. And the effort that I have to produce to get to that point is always the same. So people go to my social media and then they see like all of this beautiful image and they go like, wow, so that's cave exploration. And it's like, well, that's like 2% of cave exploration. 98% of cave exploration is doing the exact same thing. You wake up super early, You hike large distances, you carry equipment, it's extremely exhausting, you get eaten by mosquitoes, you're sweating, you're falling, you're tripping, you're cutting yourself, and 98% of the time you find nothing. And then you just go home very sad and defeated, and then you try it again the next day. But those 2% of times you find something extraordinary. But the really important thing to understand is it's always the same effort. So this is what originally got me hooked. I was very, very fortunate that already in 2011 I did my first project outside of Mexico, which was in Belize. Very interesting with universities from the United States who did archaeology. There was a specialist on the Mayan culture, and we dove some inland cenotes in Belize. I was covered by the New York Times, which pretty awesome. Until today, there's an article with my pictures and videos of me in the New York Times. So this got me really hooked on that. Then I was very lucky. I was partaking in projects with National Geographic also. So all of this was really cool. And then ultimately in 2000, and then I did a couple of trips to Dominican Republic, which was also outside of Mexico. But all of these projects were quite local. There was some traveling involved, mostly by car, but we usually always went back home and slept in a bed. And then in 2013 or 14 was the first time I did a major expedition very far away, which was the southern tip of Madagascar. And I remember perfectly when my exploration partner Philip called me and he said, "Hey, what's up? Do you want to go explore caves in Madagascar?" And I thought, well, it's not around the corner, because I live in Mexico. And Madagascar, in my mind, around the equator, but like quite low, and then it looked quite deserty, like caves in Madagascar, are we sure? And he said, well, at the bottom of Madagascar, there's a 200 square kilometer limestone plateau. Limestone is what the predominant rock that we have for the formation of subterranean caves. And he said, dude, if there is no caves, it's the Mozambique Channel. It's very famous for surfing. Very famous. There's no surf because there's no infrastructure there. But worst case scenario, we're going to have an amazing surf trip. And I thought, awesome, I'm coming. And so we did a trip there, and we spent like a month. So to explain a little bit where this is coming from, so no, there's not like a course you can take on exploration, so to speak. It's a bit like learning by doing. So what we did is we arrived at the southern tip. We had already some experience in dealing with locals, because we dealt with the Mayan people in the Yucatan, we dealt with local villages and tribes in the Dominican Republic. So we have a feeling to how to speak to those people, to explain them what we're looking for, and also to treat them with the respect that they deserve, because for many of these people, caves are like sacred, right? From Brazil to Haiti, to Dominican Republic, to Tanzania, to Zanzibar, they usually all, without exception, talk about spirits inside the cave. Do not ask me why, it's usually 3. I don't know if this has anything to do with Christian religion, but it's usually 3. Usually really funny names. Kuala Lumpur, and what was it? The other one was Anjanamba, Padre de Morto, and they always have pretty cool names. So then we hired a guide there in an old Toyota 4Runner with broken suspension, no air condition, and plastic leather seats. And we drove around in a desert, which was very unpleasant. And then basically that's what you do. You go to a village and you ask the people there, hey, where you get your water from? And then they bring you to these places. And then we do some scout diving, which basically means you jump in the water and just kind of have a look, like free diving. Is there something that's worthwhile to bring the equipment? And like this, it progresses. We spent there, like the first trip, 1 month and almost found nothing compared for a Mexican cave explorer. When you talk to a European cave explorer, and they find like 100 meters, like 300 feet of new cave, it's like, wow, amazing. This is like the exploration week ever, or like the find of the year. For a Mexican cave explorer, it's like anything that's like less than, I don't know, a full reel is like, oof, that was a bad day. So we really didn't find lots of proper going cave until 3 days before leaving. And that's when we discovered Malasamanga, which turned out to be, yes, a very, very huge find. We since then did documentaries there with National Geographic. We shot for BBC there. We found another cave called Avon, which was called the paleontological site of the century, covered by over 70 news outlets, Washington Post, NBC, CNN, and so forth and so forth. I forgot the other ones. And got to work with plenty of different scientists, from paleoclimate to paleontology, archaeology, geology. We had an extremophile biologist from the NASA there. So lots of really interesting things besides the cave exploration. And so Madagascar is very, very vast caves. Anjanamba, which was the second place we found many places, but the second really large place is by now 12 kilometers with a single entrance, which means it's in the top 5 longest submerged caves with a single entrance. And it has so much parts to it, right? Because this really, really poor, I mean, it's hard for people to imagine how poor the area is. The average salary on the entire country is $2 per day. But in the place where we are, there are no jobs. Right? People live in family tribes in the middle of nowhere. There's no roads. From Tulia to our base camp, it's 60 kilometers. The driving time is 7 hours, right? Because it's just so, there's no roads. So you get violently thrown around in a car. The people live so unbelievable, humble lives, yet are so happy. And then yes, in some of the places, because of our research and the cave mapping we did, they suddenly had not to walk for water for 1 hour, but they could use our cave map, drill a hole, and then find water right to where they're living or closer to it. So the impact that we can have also to local tribes and people was really nice. And so when we go there and we get received with like all the kids coming around the car, everybody's smiling. So that's pretty awesome. We also supported one of the villages there during COVID, helped them to do like a GoFundMe, then they could build a bigger school. Both my parents were school principals. So my mom always sends down like some pens and pencils and paper and books to learn French. So there's this whole exploration, and also specifically what I have lived through the last 10 years in Madagascar, from like full-on voodoo ceremonies to finding a dead person inside a cave that was lost from the village. I mean, the amount of adventures we have lived are really, really quite impressive. And then as it is learning by doing, every year that we go there, are a little bit smarter than the year before. So we found out, last year we didn't have this and this and this and that. And then we make a list, and then next year we bring it. Nowadays, when people see our dive operation in Madagascar, there's like compressors and 40 aluminum tanks and scooters and generators and whatnot. Everybody's like, wow, did you bring all of that? It's like, not in one go, but over the course of 10 years, yeah.
Yeah, that sounds incredibly rewarding. And I could listen to this for forever. How do you choose who gets to dive with you and the team?
It's a very good question. Obviously, as you can imagine...
I'm not asking for a friend.
No. As you can imagine, this is like one of the main things I get asked on social media. So how can I be part of your team? Now, first of all, there is no team. This is like the sad truth. We are a bunch of friends that just do this because also people ask and like, so how do you make money from that? And the answer is we don't. Mm-hmm. Obviously, in the moment we do something for National Geographic or BBC, there's quite a lot of money. But that's not our motivation, and we also didn't go into this thinking at some point there will be. I work very hard, save all my money, and what other people then maybe go to a resort vacation, I go and sleep on the floor somewhere in the African bush. But the exploration part is what I do for, like, this is the main drive of my life. Like, even all of the equipment that I design, yes, there's selling it, but the main drive behind my innovation in diving equipment is I want to build stuff that helps me to explore the places that I'm interested in. So the sad truth is there's no such thing as like a team, or we're just friends. Also, we used to be like a bigger group, and then over the years, the group just became smaller. And the reason for this is places like that are very hard. There's limited amount of food. The days are extremely long. If you do dives that are an average 7 hours, then it's an hour to drive there, an hour to drive back, then there's some hiking, then there's some rappelling, then there's some getting dressed. You understand the days are extremely long. There's no refrigeration there, which means it's not like we rock up with a cooler with some sandwiches. So it means you do not eat during the day, right? We have like maybe some power bars, some protein bars, but there's also a limited amount that you can bring with you on a 1 month trip with all the diving equipment we carry. So the days are long and difficult. So we all wear masks in our day-to-day life, right? And I can be a fake person and smile at you and be this super nice guy for a couple of days. But at some point, all of this gets stripped away, and you get to meet people pretty much how they are. And these are difficult places, right? Because you rock up and the Sherpas are not there. Or one of the Sherpas, by accident, opens the tanks, gets scared, everybody drops the gear, and all the Sherpas disappear in the bush. And now you're like sitting there, like hoping for everybody to come back. Then gear breaks, you're in the middle of nowhere, then you did all of that, then your suit breaks and you can't dive. There's a huge amount of frustration and emotional pain. So if you don't have the capability in those moments to smile, crack a joke, and get on with it, you are generally not the correct match for a project like this. Because the problem is, everybody's sad and tired and angry and exhausted, and the last thing you need is somebody just nagging along, and they go like, well, thanks for pointing out. I'm hungry too, by the way. So this is why our team became quite smaller. We are also very lucky that within a very small team, we have a lot of capabilities. Right? We have one guy that's an amazing cameraman, Philip. His father actually has 2 Oscars and an Emmy for underwater documentaries from the 70s. We have Hans, who is just a genius in organizing, and he used to run a multi-million-dollar company in pharmaceutical advertising. So he's just so organized. I know quite a bit of things about diving, and I usually train the people. So everybody can, and most of us can do several things. So it's not like, oh, he's just doing this. No, he does this, and that. And so when people ask me, hey, what can I do to partake in a project? So what I would usually tell them is, now that cave diving becomes a more popular sport, why don't you start by looking in your own country? Right? Because suddenly now we have caves in Austria, we have caves in Italy, we have caves everywhere. So start by doing that. Then you can always reach out to people like me, or when you see other people that do projects, and then ask for, like, how can I get into that? And then small steps. For sure, the more skills you have, the more useful you are to an expedition. In cave exploration, I would for sure tell people have some experience in SRT, like using ropes to go up and down. And what I would always recommend people is be as physically fit as humanly possible. I think one of the problematic things I can see in the general diving industry is there's a lot of the deco beer type of people, and you will most likely be wrong for this type of expeditions. We have limited amount of energy, we need to focus that. So generally speaking, maybe alcohol is not the correct drink for even the evening. You will need some cardiovascular fitness because there's a lot of hiking and walking and rappelling, and that's even easy type of exploration. When I think about stuff we do in the Dominican Republic, that's multi-siphon. So we dive, we come out in a dry cave, we climb over collapses with the equipment, then we dive again, then we climb again, like on rope with dry suit. It's brutally hot. And then we're done there, and then we have to do the whole trip back. If you would be gassed, if you would roll an ankle, the consequences would be devastating, because rescue would be here to get you in a week. So that would be really problematic. So that is what I would suggest. Have a bunch of different skills, maybe also maintenance, how to fix a compressor, how to fix regulators and lights. Be extremely physically fit, or like maybe extremely exaggerated, but be reasonably physically fit. Try to have a healthy lifestyle. Be a fun person to hang out, even if everything turns to shit. And once you have all of those really easy obtainable, then you go for it.
Sounds super easy to me. Right. How do you keep fit? What kind of sports do you do?
It's like a mix. I do weightlifting. The weightlifting is mostly for me injury prevention. Right, we carry cylinders, rebreathers, DPVs. If it's early in the morning, you're tired, you make a wrong move. So to have a good foundation of muscle will help you to avoid injury. And then cardiovascular fitness. So me personally, I run. I do trail running and ultra marathons, which is a really nice preparation. But I would say anything like swimming or bicycle, whatever floats your boat. But cardiovascular fitness is not only for like the expedition point of view, but even if you think about what we talked about in Australia, like CO2 related issues, right? What's a really good way to avoid hypercapnia? Produce less CO2, right? So doing stuff like this and like cross training is gonna be a pretty good way to, because ultimately this is the biggest concern, right? How can I do this type of expeditions but as safe as possible? It's quite funny when people look at my Instagram. They have, specifically my parents, they have this imagination that I'm this daredevil, fearless, and it could not be further from the truth. I'm scared a lot, which is normal. I'm hanging on a rope and it's like 300 feet below me. If I would fall, I would have a long time to regret that being on that rope in the first place. Right? It's long enough that I would scream, inhale again, scream again before I hit the floor. And then if I'm lucky enough, I'm going to be dead. If I'm not so lucky, I will be with an open femur fracture, slowly bleeding to death at the bottom of it. So that would be very not great. Or I'm just rolling my ankle, can't walk any longer, for sure can't swim, and now I'm stuck in some dry cave section, and I have to wait for some international team to come and get me. So all of this sounds pretty horrible to me, and I'm terrified of it. I'm scared. Also, when I explore small cave in serious ability, it's terrifying. I don't want to drown. I don't want to die. I don't want to hurt myself. So obviously, these things are terrifying, and the only thing I can do against it is try to prepare myself for it as much as possible. So that means physical training, dive training, like buoyancy or good buoyancy. I don't even like the word buoyancy much. So being stable, but feeling underwater like we are feeling right now sitting in this chair. First of all, it doesn't happen by accident. Second, it doesn't happen by just swimming around. It's like, oh, if you just do 1,000 dives, it's going to happen. No, it won't. It's dedicated practice. Once you have it, you always have it. That's also not true, right? It's this funny thing in diving. Sometimes people go like, oh, I have this card. And I'm like, well, just put this on another sport. Ask Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan, after 2 years, did you stop practicing your jump shot? Because Michael Jordan, right, you know how to jump shot. You don't have to, you have the card. I'm a jump shot expert. So, and of course the answer is no, it's a sport, right? And it's all perishable skills. So if I don't practice those things and dedicated practice, right? Michael Jordan did just come and dribble the ball and like, no, he went to the same point and did the same jump shot 1,000 times. And then the next week he did the same jump shot from the same location 1,000 times until you practice this, right? Or take football or tennis or whatever you want to do. It's dedicated practice. It's not like I'm going to do a fun game and I'm going to learn while I'm doing it. No, I'm going to jump in the water with the specific purpose of I will practice my stability today. Right? So I'm going to jump in shallow water, I'm going to remove my fins, I'm going to keep my legs together, and I'm going to try to stay static in one place without moving, ideally for an hour, right? Which sounds like the most boring thing on the face of the earth, which it is. But it's things like this, right? And it is the running, it's the going to the gym, it's all of those things put together that ultimately will make you safer and give you the confidence also in a moment when I'm terrified. But I know I am mentally prepared, I'm physically prepared, I've practiced those things, and that allows me in a moment where I'm really terrified to keep on advancing very, very slowly, methodically, and until I reach my threshold, and then I put my tail between my legs and I leave the cave. But then usually the next day when I come to the same place, I have more confidence and then I can go a bit further. But it's this mix of being a trained diver, having good physical condition, because also I believe that your cardiovascular fitness and your fitness in general is going to have a huge influence to your mental framework and how you experience something. Specifically, if you think about like multi-siphon, if I would be crazy exhausted climbing over a dry cave collapse, and then after thought, wow, now I still have to dive and pass through restrictions, and I'm already huffing and puffing, it would be quite intimidating. But because I feel quite good, then I'm also staying more relaxed. So now when I do, and then I do like expeditions outside of my team, like I'm exploring, for example, in the Philippines with well, I guess they are still clients, but they also became friends. I'm exploring in the Philippines there, or I'm with friends also in Thailand in very deep flooded inland mines. Then they just usually know, I mean, I don't force people to go run with me in the morning, but they do know that. And I'm open to them about it. If you guys want to like hang out and smash a couple of beers in the evening, then count me out. I just don't want to be, right? Because the reality is, they're like, well, it's not your problem. Okay, but if you have a problem underwater, I have to be there to fix it. If you get bent, I have to be the guy that drives you to the chamber. If you get hurt, I'm the guy that has to call your family. And that is where I say, it's cool if you want to do that, I just don't want to be part of it, right? So if people generally want to have me on their project, which I'm honored and I love it, I love to do different things, I also love to share what I know about exploration, right? So for example, in the Philippines, those guys were already exploring some time, and then it got a bit tighter, a bit more problematic, and then they just asked, yo, Patrick, can you come and help us a little bit and show us how to do that? And then I'm not even the guy that's going to run the reel. And I'm going to go there, I'm like, why don't you run the reel? I do the survey behind you, but I can also help you in a moment, like maybe you remove the tank, maybe you do this, maybe do that. You still get to do the fun or action part. I'm just going to make sure that you do it in a safe way, and it's also fun and stimulating for me. Same was in Brazil, where the Brazilian Speleological Society reached out to us and said, hey, we have permits for the first time in 30 years to explore caves in Brazil. We don't have a lot of know-how. Would you guys mind to come here and help us and show us how to do that? We do this. But I usually am very upfront about it. Yes, but there's some rules. No smoking before diving. No, if somebody drinks a beer for dinner, it's okay, but no excessive alcohol consumption. And just an overall, like specifically the more complicated or complex the dives get, then I want to be with people that I have not only the diving skill to pull it off, but also the physical condition to do it.
All right. I do have another question. Well, I have 100 other questions, but you started developing equipment.
Yes.
To go further in, like you were limited in where you could go, and that is where you started making your own equipment or putting thought into different equipment. Is that?
Didn't happen exactly this way. So the way to explain it, so that started mostly for me with Sidemount equipment. So when I started Sidemount diving in 2005, there wasn't a lot. So there was the Armadillo by late Brett Hemphill. But how to say that? It was American-sized. And unfortunately, for my American friends called me a girl-sized man. So for me as girl-sized man, it was just way too large. So I could not really use that.
Gotcha.
I don't know if you're going to have to edit that out, but this is just it was way too big for me. And so I started to make my own equipment. Like I said, try to because we dove a very small cave. And in that case, less is more, right? Because everything that you bring that you don't need, you break it loose, you don't get yourself entangled or stuck with. So it was a minimalized version. And then I was the safety officer of, at the time, the world's distance record in cave diving, which was a bit of a gimmick, to be honest. But I hung out, and at the time, most cave divers had back-mounted doubles. Of course, there was a lot of side-mounting already in Florida, and also in the 90s in specific caves in Noc and other places, but it wasn't a very broad, like it was not mainstream, let's call it like this. But I don't want to call myself at all a pioneer of side mounting because it's far from it, right? I only did this since 2005, it was 20 years before. But it was definitely not mainstream at the time. So the team that I was with, so one of the owners was the owner of Equus, the European gear manufacturer, and he just was the first time he saw side mounting, and he was like, well, how is this? And I'm like, well, we have the tanks on the side because of transporting cylinders separate is easier in the jungle and dry cave, and we can fit through smaller spots and so forth and so forth. And then he was like, well, I would be interested to professionally manufacture equipment with you. And so this was my first step into that, and that was really crazy. I remember perfectly, I drew all of the designs on a piece of paper. We were at the side of a cenote called The Pit, and we had a bit of a back and forth. And 8 months later, some guy from Europe rocked up in my shop and had the first prototype, and I was mind blown. I was like, wow, something that I drew on a napkin. It wasn't a napkin, it was a piece of paper, but it sounds cooler when I say napkin. Something that I drew on a napkin on the side of a cenote is like now physically in my hands, and it looks epic. So then unfortunately I had endless problems with that company. Maybe language barrier, I don't know. There's a huge back and forth for like a year and a half. I managed to suppress all of the memory. And then ultimately I got introduced to the owner of X-Deep. And I was teaching cave diving in France at the time. And I don't know if it was email or phone call, but he was like, hey, we should design equipment together. And I said, okay, but if we do this, I want to have a contract that secures me because of the problem that I had with the previous company. I'm not that naive anymore. I need a contract that states that the intellectual property is mine. And he was like, yeah, sure. Where are you? And I'm like, in the south of France. And he was like, okay, I'm there tomorrow. And he rocked up the next day. We sat in the courtyard of a close friend of mine in Aix-en-Provence, and it became a design frenzy. Piotr, the owner of X-Deep, is, maybe I shouldn't say that on camera, but he is an unbelievable genius. I mean, I'm in awe of his problem solution capability, and his general, he's just insanely smart. And this works really well. It's like almost playing table tennis. Like I point out the things that don't work, and he has a way to fix it. And then we admire each other for our individual skill. He admires me for understanding what doesn't work and the root cause, and I massively admire him for his way to solve the problem through innovative engineering, but also like his choice. He knows so much about different materials and fabrics and different stitching. He is just a wealth of knowledge. So to design equipment with him is fun. I really, really, really enjoy it. I wish we would have more time. I wish I could make wet notes that people would buy for $350 because it would be the most amazing wet notes ever. So this has become a really fun part for me. And by now, thanks to a bit of a reputation stuff, I just did a project with Big Blue about the exploration cave diving light. I get to do cool stuff. Now, the really awesome thing for me is I have like this idea of what this would be cool, and I actually convince people to then make it and give them to me for free, so I love it. And then the Rebreather was like, yeah, definitely the it is definitely by far the biggest project of my life in regards to equipment design. And I mean, I would have never thought that I will design the most sold sidemount equipment in the history of side mounting. I remember key moments, like the first manual that I read about side mounting was from Brian Kaycock, the absolute legend. And I remember the day he sent me an email, and it was like, "Dear Patrick, my name is Brian Kaycock." And then he went on to explain who he is, as if that would be necessary, and said, "Hey, I'm going to go to OSTEC, and I'm going to give a presentation on different sidemount equipments. Would you mind if I present yours?" And I was like, Brian, who are you? No, it's like, yes, of course, would be a huge honor. And a couple of years later, he actually then switched to dive the stealth. A couple of years later, then Ed Sorensen started to use the stealth, and that, of course, for me is like, I'm from a 700 people village in the middle of nowhere, and now like some of the biggest names of side mounting choose the equipment that I helped design as their personal equipment. So that was mind-blowing for me. Still the most mind-blowing thing for me is, like, I was like a fan, still am. I'm a fan of cave diving. So I read like the Darkness Beckons and like all of these books, and nowadays I'm like going on a trade show, and there's Martin Farr, who wrote the Darkness Beckons, and he walks up to me and says like, "Hey Patrick, how are you doing?" I'm like, "Can't believe that you know who I am," you know. Jared Jablonski. So like I have like so many heroes. And that now I'm in a moment when like these people know who I am, and I can just talk to them on trade shows. It's pretty crazy for me. And I think this is something really unique and awesome to our sport also. That like the biggest names in our industry, they are like so accessible. And yeah, it's really awesome for me. And the whole journey of gear manufacturing and building gear for future generations, for me, there's a huge legacy part. I mean, I have to admit, now when I'm traveling around the world and I come to South Korea and there's people running around in X-Deep equipment, it's just awesome. I'm like, wow, I was part in that. So specifically in Mexico now, it's like, I don't know, when you come to Cenote, like the vast, maybe, I don't know, 85% of the sidemount equipment there is all X-Deep. So it is quite flashy. Specifically then, if I like do a family vacation, I come home and I remember again where I'm from. So it's pretty cool.
Great. Well, thank you, Patrick. This was great. I could ask a ton more questions, but I think we're running out of time. So thank you again for making the time. It was a pleasure talking to you. And if you want to share anything else with our members, thank you for being a member, by the way.
Yeah, of course.
But if you want to share anything else with our members,
thank you for inviting me. This was fun. I love to reminisce sometimes about the past and everything that happened. It happened so fast. It's like over 20 years now. I want to state that Dan has saved my ass more than once in the past. I had some run-ins with decompression sickness. Thanks God, it's quite some time ago. It was 2009. But at the time, I started to do very long. So at average 90 meters, 300 feet, but like over an hour bottom time. So it was the first time that I did like habitat decompression and very, very long bottom times. And I had my run-in with my own physiology. And Dan was amazing at the time to help me. So I'm very grateful for that, and I'm happy to support and anything that I can do. I think it's really, when you are in that moment where your career is in danger and you're at the recompression facility and you don't know, to have somebody that you can trust, somebody to have on the phone, in my case back then it was Dr. Van Lark, and you can discuss it with the expert, and you know you don't have to worry about the money part and everything is taken care of, is really great. And I still think that you guys produce absolutely amazing information also for people to read up. I remember the first time I heard about PFO, then you guys brought out parts about PFO. So like there's a lot of information on your webpage, and it's a really great organization. If there's something I can do to help and contribute to it, it's an honor and a pleasure.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Glad that all worked out.